Hello and welcome to Home with Sarah Jane. Today I wanted to share how I'll be setting up our Ofrenda or altar for Day of the Dead, and how I will be using certain resources in my homeschool to teach my kids a little bit more about the history and traditions of Day of the Dead. So if you're new here, I am Sarah. I'm a homeschooling mom to two girls ages 10 and 13. They are in 5th and 8th grade. And typically we don't really tie in any kind of Day of the Dead type of things into our homeschool other than maybe like a craft project. But I wanted to do things just a little bit differently this year and just add a couple of books or stories to help celebrate Day of the Dead. So we celebrate Day of the Dead on November 1st and November 2nd. And normally what we do is we just make Day of the Dead bread or dead bread. And we go to the cemetery, listen to music, take marigolds, and just visit our relatives at the cemetery. But this year I wanted to do things just a little bit differently. We do normally watch the movies Coco and The Book of Life as well. That will be something we'll continue to do. But I wanted to add in just a couple of books and resources in my homeschool. And then also later in this video, I will show you how I will be setting up my altar or Ofrenda in the small space in my dining room. So one of the first resources that I'll be using is called Day of the Dead. And this book says, above a small town in Mexico, the sun rises like a great marigold, and one family begins preparations for an annual celebration, the Day of the Dead. Soon they will go out into the night, join their neighbors, and walk to the graveyard to welcome the spirits of their loved ones home again. So this book I've never used. I just purchased it it's been a couple of months now, I think. But I just purchased this book this year to use in my homeschool. And it already kind of makes me reminisce a little bit. I remember when I was younger, I used to have really short hair. And one of my great aunts would braid yarn into my short hair to give me braids that wrapped around. And I would get all dressed up and I would march with a whole bunch of people down to the cemetery for Day of the Dead. And we would all celebrate together. And I remember doing that a couple of times with a lot of my family. And it was a really special time. And so for them to say that, they were talking about joining their neighbors and friends and walking to the graveyard. It reminded me of that. So it was just like one of those, good feelings. Now, another book that I'll be using, this one is called Celebrating Day of the Dead, and it's History, Traditions, and Activities, a holiday book for kids. This one I wanted to pull in more to talk about the history and traditions for this holiday, because lately, or the past few years, Day of the Dead in my house has just been, like I said, making dead bread and going to the cemetery with music and flowers. So I just wanted to kind of try and tie in a few more of those traditions and learn a little bit more history, or at least teach my kids a little bit more about the history of Day of the Dead. So that's why I added this book in. And it does look like a lot of fun. And it does have activity ideas and things like that. And then this is just for fun, but my kids like Mad Libs. So I bought this Happy Halloween Mad Libs book. And I didn't realize that this was 3 books in one. And one of the books is Day of the Dead Mad Libs. So we will also be doing a few silly stories with these Mad Libs. And again, like I said, I didn't realize when I bought this one that it even had this in here. So this was, this was a win. So we'll be using this, for a little bit and just making some silly stories. And then the last thing I purchased was just a Day of the Dead puzzle. I purchased this so that we can just, do this puzzle over a couple of days while I'm doing read out loud or something like that. But just another way to kind of celebrate Day of the Dead. So now I want to go ahead and show you my altar or Ofrenda, and I will go ahead and show you how I'm going to be setting that up. So the first thing I need to do is I need to clear this off. Normally, or not normally, if I had more space in my house, I would definitely have one of those huge, like 7-tiered altars. in my home, but this is the only space I can really put it. It's only 3 tiers, but I'll make it work. I do have a lot, unfortunately, I have a lot of people that do go up on my altar. So I don't really have a lot of room to get more like decor or decoration on my altar. It's just because I have so many picture frames to put up here. So I'm just gonna get started by clearing this out. And as I'm clearing this out and setting it up, I will try and explain maybe some of the traditions and things that I'll be adding to this later on. Because typically you would add Day of the Dead bread or dead bread to your altar. You would have salt, you would have water, you would have your white cross, you would have certain things on here. But because I'm decorating a couple of weeks in advance, which I always do, I don't add the food or water or any of that until later. But I like to see all of the faces on the altar for more than just, 2 days out of the year. I like to have them up here and celebrated for a longer period of time. So that is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be setting this up a couple of weeks before Day of the Dead. What is the date today, Bean? Do you know?
I think it's
the 10th, right? Yeah, it's October 10th today. And again, we don't celebrate Day of the Dead until November 1st and November 2nd. So I'm just going to get started taking this down and then putting up my altar. So I'm going to try to explain as best as I can how my family celebrates the Day of the Dead. So during the 2 days of Day of the Dead, we gather at either homes or at a cemetery to share food and drinks with one another and with the spirits of our loved ones. We like to listen to music and just have like a good time. The first day, November 1st, is when we celebrate the souls of children. And the second day, November 2nd, is when we celebrate the souls of adults. So, one of the ways that we like to celebrate is setting up an ofrenda or an altar so that our loved ones' spirits have like an entryway to meet up with us on these days. So, it's kind of like you have to have their picture up on the ofrenda in order for them to be able to come back and visit. So, I also wanted to point out that everything on the ofrenda pretty much serves a purpose. So even down to how many tiers that you have. So I have a 3-tiered ofrenda that is supposed to represent the division between the earth, the sky, and the underworld. I know that some people will only have 2 tiers, which will represent that division between the earth and the sky. And I know that even some people have like the 7 big, beautiful tiers that I would love to have. And that is supposed to represent the 7 levels that a soul must go through in order to make it to hopefully heaven. And it also is supposed to represent the 7 deadly sins. Now, that is just what I was taught. I'm not sure if that's what's believed, worldwide, but I also wanted to mention that the tissue paper that we use is because it is light and it can move really easily. So when we notice that tissue paper moving, it's supposed to let us know that the spirits have arrived. So I'm also putting up marigolds on this altar. It is pretty much a traditional flower that is used, but the marigolds, or just the color gold in general, is believed to help guide the spirits back to their own ofrenda or their own graves to visit. Also, candles represent that as well. Candles, that flame from the fire is supposed to be like a guiding light back to their ofrenda. And now you can notice the skulls that I put up. The skulls are a way to celebrate that a person's soul lives on even after the body dies. And then, of course, wouldn't be a celebration without food and water. So, well, you could pretty much use any kind of drink. I use water. But yeah, so then we just celebrate with favorite foods from our loved ones. So, another thing I wanted to mention is that the movie Coco does such an amazing job explaining the Day of the Dead. One of the main characters, Coco, she reminds me so much of my great grandmother. She looks like her, she sounds like her. And I remember seeing this movie in the movie theater, and the moment I seen her and the first time that she spoke, I just instantly started crying. But it was like tears of joy. It was just kind of remembering my grandmother. Another great movie to watch is The Book of Life. That's a really good movie to watch for Day of the Dead as well. Oh, this is where I was getting frustrated because none of my candles were working. So I had to put new batteries in all of my candles. I am using remote controlled candles for right now, only because I don't like to light my actual candles until the Day of the Dead. That little veil I just pulled out actually belonged to my great grandmother. She used to wear veils when she would go to church, and I just like to add those little personal belongings. I just love taking this time and sharing stories with my children about some of our loved ones that have passed. It's just a really beautiful, beautiful celebration. Okay, so here it is all completed. The actual like real candles I will not light until November 1st and 2nd. I just use these like battery operated ones for right now. But yeah, so that is it for today. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments section. You have a great day. Bye.